In this video, I'm going to demonstrate the shaper effect. This is a distortion unit. So I'm going to add a shape 1 and let me disable that. Right now I'm starting with the initialize patch, so that just sounds like this. Alright, and I'm just going to thicken this up a bit. Let's go ahead and set it to 11 voices and detune some. Okay, so let's enable the shaper effect. And this is what's called a wave shaper. And in effect, what it does is it starts to change the shape of the overall waveform. And there are 4 different distortion algorithms for this effect: shape, T-drive, crush, and wedge, and each one has its own characteristics. So I'm just going to go through, similarly to how I demonstrated the different filter types, I'm going to go through and demonstrate these distortion types. So let's start with shape. Depth, in effect, controls basically the amount of distortion, and edge is basically a tone type control. So it affects the overall tonality. So let me just hold a note down. And I'm going to zoom in here on the oscilloscope. That way we can get an idea of what it's doing to the waveform. In fact, to demonstrate that, let me switch back to single and bring detune down to 0. So without shape, we just have a saw wave, okay? But if I enable the shaper effect, you'll start to see a change in the wave shape. And now if I change the depth and edge, in fact, I'll bring them both down to 0, and then I'll increase depth. In fact, with edge at maximum, it's almost as if it is a saw wave, but you'll notice that it has a slight curve to it on the ramp. Alright, so very subtle changes occurring there. It's basically adding some harmonics. That distortion is causing more harmonics to be added, slight differences in the overall tonality. I'm going to increase the input. Now, this input control will affect the overall tonality. In fact, it kind of drives the distortion harder, if you will. The output as well, that will affect the overall output of the distortion unit. And then this high out, that will boost the high end. So let me go ahead and demonstrate each of these. So you could see the harmonics, the higher harmonics being added here. Okay, now let's look at T-drive. This is a different algorithm. Notice this bump here that's been added to the wave. It's interesting. Any change to the wave shape will naturally affect the particular mix of harmonics that are present in that signal. In fact, you can see some harmonic content changing here. Okay, and now let me go to the next one, crush. This is in effect a bit reducer, bit rate reducer. That is an interesting effect. And finally, the wedge. Okay, now let's check these out again, but adding a 11 stacked waveform here with slight detuning, or moderate detuning, I should say. Okay, let's try the T drive. And really, it's just a matter of knowing, okay, if you're trying to reproduce a sound, understanding, okay, what does distortion or saturation sound like? And that's one of the purposes of this video, is to demonstrate exactly, okay, this is what it sounds like. And then hopefully you'll hear that and recognize it by basically repeated exposure to the sound. You're going to be able to learn to recognize it when you hear it. And you'll think, okay, that sounds like distortion. Let me go ahead and try putting a distortion unit on this particular patch that I'm working on. Okay, and that's kind of what the goal of this video is, as well as just to demonstrate the modes, the distortion modes that Zebra has. So let's try T drive on this oscillator 1 sound. Okay, let's try crush. Remember, this is a bitrate reducer. and then finally the wedge. Okay, now another thing you can do with the shaper is put it in parallel, depending on what you're trying to achieve, and then this will let the main sound come through and then allow us to mix in the distortion using lane 2 here. So this would be the sound without any distortion. Then I could blend that in, mix it in with this volume control on lane 2. Let's try some other modes. And that's it for the shaper effect. I'll see you in the next video.